Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming along to this session. We're going to talk about the NHS supply chain, but also really focus on the work that's happening in Yorkshire and across Sheffield in working together to create exceptional value for the NHS and delivering exceptional patient care. I'm Andrew New, I'm the Chief Executive of the NHS Supply Chain, and I'm delighted that I've got both Kathy and Andrea with me today. I'm only going to be speaking for 5 minutes or so, and I'm going to hand over to the guys to talk about their projects and the things they've managed to deliver by working so closely with us. So I'm quickly going to talk about a bit of the history. A few years ago, if the NHS supply chain came to this kind of session, we would talk about this. We would talk about trucks and sheds. We'd talk about storing stuff for the NHS. We'd talk about how we're working to buy things in the most efficient way. And what we want to say really is the world's moved on. We recognise our responsibilities still remain all of these things, but actually we've got to contribute to the NHS in a far broader way in the future. And we want to talk about these things. These things are a bit different. We want to talk about how we can generate efficiency and productivity in the care system. We want to talk about how we can free up our clinical time to care for patients. We want to talk about taking the responsibility to do the task once to support all of the procurement teams across the NHS in delivering their exceptional services. We want to talk about designing a resilient and sustainable supply chain that will always be there when the NHS needs it, not just on the good days. We want to talk about ensuring we comply with recent legislation, making sure that we're committed to eradicating modern slavery wherever it exists around the world and wherever it might impact on our supply chain. And finally, we want to make sure that everything we do is focused on achieving exceptional patient outcomes. We recognise the things that we buy that are consumed by clinicians in caring for patients have a huge impact on the outcomes those patients have, and actually we can contribute through our data, our insights, our knowledge and understanding in a different way in the future. We're actually quite a big organisation in modern terms. We're responsible for around £6 billion of spend across the NHS. 4.2 billion of it we're transacting ourselves this year. We've got over 1,000 suppliers contributing different products and services in care delivery. And we manage around 8 million orders on a regular basis from the system, delivering regularly to all care settings across the UK. We receive orders and fulfill them through different channels, and we're looking to modernise our infrastructure to make sure we're supporting care wherever it may take place. But actually the things we do aren't enough. And I've talked about a legacy organisation of trucks and sheds and just buying things. I've talked about the broader value proposition that we can offer to the NHS and how we have to contribute more. To do that, we recognise we have to fundamentally change our organisation. We're supporting the NHS through implementing inventory management solutions within trusts. We're accelerating access to innovative new products to the NHS by using dynamic purchasing systems and better understanding of supplier markets. We're introducing new capacity into our physical network to stock different products and be able to respond to different markets in different segments. And we're updating our ordering systems. It's not been easy enough for care providers to buy products through the NHS supply chain, and we're committed to make sure that we are the easiest route for anyone to purchase products through to deliver that exceptional patient care. So we've said about our new strategy. We've said we're here to buy smart. We know we have to procure the right products at the right time for the right price, make them consistently available. We know we have to supply right, making sure we're supporting care through any channel in any location to mean that any care practitioner can use the right products to deliver exceptional care. And to do that, we have to partner expertly. And that means partnering with the suppliers, that means partnering across the system. We're a core part of what the NHS does, and we recognise our commitments delivering exceptional care. But this is an opportunity to talk to some of our partners and actually understand a bit more about the work they've been doing. So I'd love to hand over to Kathy to talk next.
Hello, can people hear me? Excellent. So my name's Kathy Hassler, I'm the Managing Director of South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw Acute Federation, and I've been asked to come and set the local context for the hip and collaborative procurement project we've done on hip and knee replacement. So we are a provider collaborative of 5 acute trusts in South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw. And the chief executives, chairs, the boards, the executive teams and others some of whom I can see in the audience, have all committed to these 6 kind of purpose statements. So 1, working together to drive the quality of care to be amongst the best in the country, so standardising high quality care. 2, reducing health inequalities for the populations we serve. 3, doing everything we can to have happy staff in South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw. 4, being a great partner to the rest of the system, so there are lots of other players. There are community trusts, there's primary care, there's social care. 5 is about waiting times and working together to drive down waiting times. And 6 is about working together to more effectively use the NHS pound so that there's enough resource for everybody. And you can see the 5 acute trusts that are involved at the bottom. So the South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw landscape is really made up of 5 places. So we've got Barnsley, Doncaster, Bassetlaw, Rotherham and Sheffield. And it's an area of the country where we have quite high levels of deprivation. The average life expectancy is shorter in South Yorkshire than it is for the national average. The gap between life expectancy of the most deprived between the most deprived and least deprived is about 8 years. And the other thing to note is about 45% of the life years spent in ill health are attributed to musculoskeletal disease, cardiovascular disease and mental ill health. So what we did was we developed a clinical strategy, which is really a 5-year framework for clinical collaboration. You can't read all of the text on this slide, but it gives you an idea of what we've done. And the strategy is centred around these 3 themes in the middle. So 1, clinical services, doing all we can to standardise the quality of care across South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw, making sure that patients can move more seamlessly between all of the providers, so whether that's to the tertiary provider or from or to a different urgent care centre. The second area is clinical workforce, so what we're trying to do is create a networked workforce across South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw providers so that we have more resilience and sustainability. It's probably our biggest risk is workforce and the shortage of staff in certain groups. And then the third area is around the clinical enablers, so things like digital technology, medical technology, innovation, research and development, looking at interoperability between all of the providers. They're the sorts of things that we know are sort of excellent enablers for all of the other things that I've talked about relating to clinical workforce and clinical services. So here are our programme priorities for this current year. So we have 1, elective and diagnostic recovery, which is a priority right across the country. We are taking a range of actions to help us with our backlogs, where we've built the Sheffield Elective Orthopaedic Centre. We've also built Mexborough Elective Orthopaedic Centre, which will be opened in early 2024, and that will serve Rotherham, Barnsley and Doncaster, and various other things. And you can see there that orthopaedics, which relates to the hip and knee project that Andrea is going to talk to you about, is one of our most challenged areas. It is the trauma and orthopaedics accounts for 10.5% of the waiting list, so it's the biggest waiting list that we have, and we do about 3,000 hip and knee joint replacements a year, so it's a big amount of our spend. Secondly, we've got the clinical strategy, which I just talked to you about. We are using that to identify the either fragile services that need support from other providers, or where we have examples of excellent practice that we want to share across the patch. So we're focused at the moment on urology and rheumatology, but the other services are suggested to us all the time. The third priority for this year relates to the procurement, collaborative procurement that we're talking about today. So we're looking at innovative commissioning and financial improvement. Seeing when we take procurement, it's particularly looking at our collective buying power and what we can do through economies of scale. The fourth priority for this year is our Acute Paediatrics Innovator Project. So we're one of 9 national innovators for provider collaboration based on our Acute Trust Paediatric Innovator Project. And then the fifth priority is about engagement to drive collaboration, and particularly looking at organisational development, not only for clinical staff but also for all operational staff. So I suppose the point here is that these are all linked. Some of them sound different, but actually they're all linked. The innovative commissioning and financial improvement priority relates to, and the work that we're doing on collaborative procurement can only help us make progress for patients in all of the other areas. So if we save money on collaborative procurement on hip and knee projects, it means there is more money to reinvest in other services through, to help us with elective recovery, whether that's through building the elective orthopaedic centres or to reinvest into workforce. All of this is linked, and it's all integral to our plan. These may change next year, but we know that there will always be a focus on financial improvement and working together to make the best use of the NHS pound. And that before I hand over to Andrea, I just wanted to say the two things. I've been only in post for 8 months, but the two things I've observed with the hip and knee collaborative procurement project that I think have made it a success are, one, really strong clinical leadership, and two, heads of procurement who really get it, understand that working together is the future, and that's the way we're going to overcome the challenges that we're facing. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Andrea Smith. I'm the ICS Procurement Director in South Yorkshire, and I'm just going to go through what we actually did for the hip and knee project. So we had a very clear problem. We had a £500,000 cost pressure on our hips and knees across South Yorkshire. So what we needed to do is come up with a strategy for South Yorkshire that helped standardise hips and knees and also helped manage the market at the same time. We had the challenge and we set the baseline with our colleagues at NHS Supply Chain. We had 6 suppliers across hips and knees, a spend of £5.6 million. We didn't have active engagement from suppliers to help with activity recover. Very little standardisation. If colleagues in orthopaedics moved from one trust to another, they were using different products. We had no joined up contract management and no easy way to reduce the cost pressure. So we worked together with executives at each trust and clinical colleagues, and we agreed that every trust would be in this. No one trust would be out of it. We all agreed that everyone was in it. We had a clinical lead in orthopaedics that was well respected in every trust, and we agreed that the supplier choice would be fully clinically led. In procurement, we knew that whatever standardisation they went for, it would make a saving, some more than others. However, we wanted it to be fully clinically led. So it was choose whatever you would like, but you all had to choose the same. So we engaged the market to ensure they understood that challenge, and we needed strong executive support. We know we would get pushback from some of our orthopaedic colleagues if we tried to change the products they were going to use. Here is the implementation plan, and it's a long one. So in February 2021, we got that agreement from every trust and every clinical orthopaedic lead to collaborate. We modelled all the clinical options. There was 900 clinical options across 8 suppliers. We held a supplier engagement day. This was during COVID. We had to get chief executive approval. We had to get the suppliers COVID safe. It was difficult, but we did it. We had the final model agreed by June 2022, and then we moved on to the suppliers putting forward their value-added proposition. We wanted this to be more than just the supply of hips and knees. We wanted theatre rationalisation, and we wanted more patients seen in theatre. We got trust approval in November 2022 to move forward, and that we had to go to every trust board for that. And contract award and implementation was in this year. The result is we have 3 suppliers providing hips and knees across South Yorkshire. We saved 900k per annum, which is 3.6 million over the course of the contract life. But in reality, that was more like 1.4 because we were faced with a 500k cost pressure. We removed the cost pressure and saved a further 900k. We standardised and made improvements in efficiency, so the instrumentation on the shelf was standardised. And we worked hard to ensure every clinician felt they were well trained to use the products in theatre. And we're now optimising the theatre utilisation with the suppliers and bringing the real innovation into our prosthetic hip and knee replacements. So what didn't go well? The complexity of options. It took far longer than we anticipated, and lots of patience from our NHS supply chain colleagues revamping the different options available. What went really well was the peer-to-peer discussions and challenges. So our orthopaedic leads had a secret WhatsApp group. Procurement were not invited onto that group, and they challenged one another. So if a clinician said, well, I can't possibly move to that system with no navigation, someone else would say, well, I actually do that procedure without navigation. It works perfectly well. Just try it this way. So it was real peer-to-peer, and we did have some casualties. We had an orthopaedic surgeon who decided to retire rather than change. We had someone leave one of the trusts, but the executives stood firm, and actually we got it through, and it's implemented fully now. I think what could be improved in future, rather than going to every trust board and getting approval, if we had an orthopaedic alliance across South Yorkshire to speed up that governance, that would be great, and it is something we are looking at for the future. And I think that is it, Andrew. On to questions. Thank you.
It's fantastic. I mean, this is the opportunity to ask any questions. I will just say I'd like to thank Kathy and Andrea. I think that the work that's happening in Yorkshire is a real way of leading the rest of the NHS and how to get this collaborative working thing to go well. I think taking the time to set up the infrastructure, understand how decisions are going to be made. The first few of these projects are going to take a long period of time, but the opportunity is absolutely huge. As the NHS supply chain, we've committed that we believe there is at least £1 billion worth of additional efficiency, productivity value to be delivered, but only by having the expertise operating in the ICSs, operating within the trusts, operating with the provider collaboratives who can extract that value and implement it. It's not something that we can do, it's something that we can all do together. But opportunities for questions. Any hands?
Sorry, I'm not very good with the headphone and the mic, it's all new to me. Hi, I'm Zara, a partner from Carnell Farrer. This is hugely impressive, and I can absolutely see the value this could have nationally. You made it sound a bit easy, the clinical engagement part, and I guess my question is, how on earth did you pull this off? How did you get the clinicians to agree? Orthopaedics is probably the most challenging place to get the clinicians to agree to do things differently, and I'd just love a bit more of an insight as to how do we go about helping organisations to do that?
You need some clinical leaders that are very influential. Now, that's not always the most senior clinicians in orthopaedics. You need to find those influential people. It's often the people that complain the most if you do try implementing, but actually, if you get them on side, then they're the real spearhead of the projects. And they get it, they're commercial, they are really commercial. So they don't like to think that it's loss-making in a way. And they don't like to think they're getting a worse deal than other people in the country. So they are quite a competitive bunch. We showed data. We were getting worse prices in South Yorkshire than some other areas. And their commitment was right. if we did this, reduce the cost pressure, took the pressure off their directorates within their own trusts, then they could make a difference. And the innovation that the suppliers could bring from standardising. The suppliers wanted to invest, but they want to invest in ICS-wide, not at a trust level. So they could see some of the innovations that they would get if they standardised. So there was a prize at the end of it, I suppose.
And I think it's really interesting when you look at the national scale of taking these kind of examples. I recently spent some time on the South Coast and met with their kind of clinical director operating at the ICS level and said, look, this is the kind of project that other people are delivering, and you can immediately see well, if they're doing it, why are we not doing it? And I think using some of that competitive value, using some of that data is really important. That's part of our role as kind of the national provider of these things. We can look across everyone and identify where those biggest opportunities may be. And it's about generating the case studies, building the advocacy, using really good data, and it will drive this type of improvement across the whole of the system.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm a procurement lawyer at Capsticks. I'm just interested to know what the reaction was like from the supply base when you presented this to them. Obviously, standardisation, some of them wouldn't be getting a share of the market anymore, so how did they react, and did you have engagement with them initially, for example, to try and warm them up?
Yes, these relationships are really important ones to us more generally, and we have relationships with all of the orthopaedic suppliers, but they recognise as well it's not good for them at the moment to have this fractured marketplace where there's no consistency in the buying practice. Actually, they can become more efficient, and in some cases actually losing in one region and winning in another will maintain their market share and make them more efficient as an organisation and make them more profitable. And this isn't a profit grab from us. This is about how do we make the system work in a more efficient, more effective way to allow us to focus all of the resources and time and effort on delivering what patients need. There's always going to be some winners and losers, but they recognise that when they join this type of process, this is their opportunity to compete. In the same way those clinicians, data-led, clinically thinking, patient outcome focused, this is their opportunity to demonstrate their value proposition and to demonstrate how they're aligned with what the NHS needs them to do.
Hi Andrew, I'm Robert. I'm another lawyer, unfortunately, from Hill Dickinson. I'm interested really in terms of the example. You mentioned outcomes. Now, the example that Andrea just presented, you can see the financial, the efficiencies there, but presumably there are some better clinical outcomes coming out from the work that you've done there as well in terms of the standardisation, and are you measuring and using those outcomes as well to try and incentivise the suppliers?
Yes, obviously there are national joint registry outcomes for orthopaedics, but we are actually measuring throughput as well, because the outcomes aren't just in terms of patient outcomes, which take a while. They're measured over a number of years. It is how many people we can get through theatre with a successful outcome for those patients. And also the aftercare is standardised, so patients can have treatment across South Yorkshire now because the surgeons are using the same products and they can have their physio near to their home. So we've actually changed the patient pathway for the better as well.
I think the concept of kind of contracting for efficiency is a really interesting one that we've been looking at a national level. And it's interesting as we debate these kind of principles with suppliers. At the moment, we're getting quite a lot of, that's a really good idea. We're willing to back our data and back the outcomes, potentially until you get to sign the contract. And then suddenly there's that feeling of, actually, we wanted to get this far in the process and we're not necessarily willing to stand behind it. I think we've pushed the kind of the national commercial procurement supply chain teams to say, you've got all the tools available to you. For your category of spend, you need to define what is the right way of approaching this marketplace to extract what the NHS needs from it. And that doesn't mean just stick another framework in place and then call off against it. That means design your supply chain solution and go and implement it. And if that means we're committing volumes, that means committing outcomes, that means we're paying for performance, that's fine. It's on the skills of the procurement professionals to define what their solution needs to be. Any more questions? Sounds like we're done. In that case, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Hopefully you can take some key points away from this. Working together will deliver better outcomes. Thank you very much to Andrea and Kathy. It is great to work with you, and we hope we will see you again soon. Thank you very much.